Yeah, what we're telling them is that this is not Trump just coming out with a new negotiating tactic, because that was our initial take here, was that Trump, leading up to the G20 meeting in Buenos Aires, said there was a 100% chance that he was going in with a 25% tariff on $200 billion worth of goods, only to come out of those meetings announcing a 3-month pause, which brings us to these current negotiations. But when we check back with all of our trade experts out there, what we heard was the deal was really close and China balked. And for some reason, Chinese President Xi has reached into the negotiations and said it's not a deal. And so Trump is trying to get this back on track, and he's doing everything he can to threaten China, because right now it's not an issue with President Trump, it's the Chinese side.
So Ed, do you frame that therefore as a major or a minor blow to these negotiations overall?
I think it is consistent with what we thought all along, which is that Trump views these trade fights as good politics, and that this trade fight is going to be with us throughout this year, throughout the 2020 election, and that ultimately we could get a positive headline with the deal, but we're not quite sure that if China is ever really going to follow through with it. The second the ink is dry, what you're going to see is China turn around and say, well, actually, for us to go through with this, we're going to need X, Y, and Z. China consistently has been saying they would be doing these issues for decades now, and they consistently don't follow through. And so when you look at both sides here, you realize that this is not up for an easy negotiation or resolution. It's something that will last for years to come.
I mean, Courtney, what do investors do? There's so many mixed messages. The Treasury Secretary and Larry Kudlow, economic advisor, have been telling the markets for weeks now that there's been incredible progress and they're really in the final stages of a deal. And then this.
Yeah, I mean, we would agree. We think that you will still ultimately get a deal, but there's going to be negative headlines until that point. We like to look at market indicators, and last week after Trump's call for the Fed to cut, it did look like, maybe negotiations weren't going quite as well as policymakers wanted us to believe. But ultimately, we would see a deal still coming to fruition, and weakness would be a buying opportunity to us.
Do you think, would you change your tune on this, Courtney, if we did see things physically escalate rather than just be a threat at this stage? Would that lower your hopes that a deal ever gets done?
So in our view, if you do see the president actually acting on enacting these tariffs, that would lower our hopes. If you don't have the vice premier come to these negotiations, that would lower our hopes. So we're still willing to change our tune on it. But at this point, it does look like they're still trying to reach a deal. Trump is just using his typical Trumpian negotiating skills. We saw the same thing with him threatening to put on auto tariffs with Canada when they were doing the USMCA negotiations. So at this point, we still think a deal gets done.